All right, creating our dice game. So again, to create a new sheet, when you hit the plus, a new sheet will pop up that's just blank. You should be able to add that to your rock, paper, scissors in your game coding. So I'm going to show you kind of how to create one die and how I can code this using some of the code that we've just talked about. After which I'll show you how to create a button, and then you can, again, format it. Get rid of the lines, add pictures, add graphics, fill cells with color. So I'm going to show you exactly how I made one die. You'll be able to copy and paste that, make as many as you want. So you can have some fun here. And then again, these will all change, and we're going to use the button for that. I just can't do that with the Screencastify on. And as you saw, they all change. So we're going to work on that in a new cell. So the first thing in this formatting, as I see, we're just going to start with what we would want a die to be. If we look at one die, we have to think to ourselves, okay, 6 sides. So equals rand between parenthesis 1, comma 6. 1 to 6. It's going to give me a number generator. Now let's format the die. Now when I look at it, I can see 1 in the middle. Same thing with a 5 or a 3. A 4 has 4 corners. A 6 has 2 rows of 3, and that means there's a blank row of 3. So technically, the die, if I want to look at this, is a group of 3 by 3 cells. Let's give this a color real quick. You can change these colors whenever. You could even put an image in there. But I want them to look equal. I want them to be set in such a way. Right now I'm going to make borders so you can see the lines of my grid, 3 by 3. So when I highlight something like that and I want to move this, I'm going to try to create something that is, let's say, that size. Oops. One more time. Highlight the columns. Forgot to change it to blue. Now it'll make all of them the same size. Same thing going this way. Create those 3 columns I want to create. And I want to make a square. So I've got to think to myself, is that going to be about square? Maybe a little bit more. It doesn't matter which one I grab. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. The other thing that I need to put into this code, besides a random generator, is a place where I'll put an image or a shape or a picture, whatever it would be, that will show itself up as the face of the die, the dots on the die. And in the case of this, let's just use a symbol. I use the symbol and just to make it creative. So again, if this is equal to this symbol, that symbol is going to show up. And it's real small here. Let's make this larger. And then we're going to work on our coding. Oh, again, let's put it in so that it centers it to the right. And it can even center vertical alignment right in the middle, whatever that symbol would be. So before I show you the coding, let me show you some, of course, like the one that I used. And the picture, now that you can think about that, was this shaded in dot. You can even do something as clever as this. You might use a symbol such as, in this case, a Deadpool symbol. And in the case of this one, oops, when it does the random generation, of course, there's more than 1 or 5, but you can see each of them change accordingly. Bam, bam, bam. This is the only one that isn't coded. So think about that when you're creating this. Think about where you want to place your dice. Think about where you want this done. But let me show you how to create one, and then you can move everything else around. So here we go. Again, anything that we put into this square is going to show up. So I have to think about numbers. Okay, so thinking about what a die looks like, we know that these three need to show up and these three need to show up if it's a 6. We know that the corners need to show up if it's a 4. And we can have this, this, and this show up if it's a 3. And you can think about a 5. So I think to myself, if it's a 4, 5, or 6, so equals, here we go on the code, equals, if, parenthesis, if this random generator is greater than, so we're going to be using greater than symbol, if it's greater than the number 3, meaning it won't be 3, it's greater than 3. So it has to be a 4, 5, or a 6, comma. Then we want this symbol, this picture, whatever you want to put in, to show up. Otherwise, we're going to do parenthesis, quotation mark, shows up blank. You can make it show up something else if you want to. End parenthesis, return. So if it's a 4, 5, or 6, it's a 4, that's going to show up. Well, we're going to do the same thing in this square over here. Equals, if this same cell is greater than 3, then we want the symbol to show up. Otherwise, quotation, end parenthesis, we got it. So let's do the same thing for the other two corners. Because if it's a 3, we also want this to show up. So it's boom, boom, boom. So equals, if, parenthesis, A2 is greater than, this time we want 3 to show up. 3, 4, 5, and 6. If it's greater than 2, then this image. Otherwise, quotation mark, end parenthesis. We've got that. We're going to do the same thing up here. Equals, if, parenthesis, this cell, again, is greater than 2, comma, it's going to show this. Otherwise, parenthesis, quotation mark, end parenthesis. All right, so we have that. We have the corners. Now, if it's a 6, this is the only time this is going to show up. Equals, if, you should be able to start getting this figured out. This is equal to 6, comma, then show this, comma, otherwise nothing. Do the same thing here. Equals, if, parenthesis, this is equal to 6, comma, show this, otherwise nothing. And now we're missing the center. And what about the number 2? The number 2 could be the same here and here, only shows up here and here, right? Well, just like the number 3. So we could have this also show up for the number 2. Or we could have this one and this one show up for the number 2. Well, when I look at a die, it shows it in the corners. If I want to choose these corners, let's say, we'll change this code just a little bit. If I want to show these, maybe that'll be easier. So it does show up if there's a greater than 1. That might be the easiest way as I think about this process. You might think of another way. After I show you how to do the center, you might be able to use the same sort of code. So again, I'm going to change this to greater than 1 now. So this will show up. And now the center. The center shows up for odd numbers, 1, 3, and 5. Equals, if this is equal to 1, comma, we're going to make that show up, comma, if this is equal to 3, comma, make that show up, and if this is equal to 5. And here we go. We have the 2 dice. We have our button. You have scripted this. You've assigned the script, so it calls this button or whatever word you want to use, but that word's very key. From there, we're going to do a quick scripting. I have something for you to copy and paste to make this a little easier. You can also change it up to anything, but just for fun, and just so I know that you've scripted it with the same thing, you go to script editor. Sometimes it's going to load. You've got to make sure it's going to load into your account. I've already called this button, but it's going to show up with something that looks more like, I'll show you in a second. It's just going to say function, parenthesis. You're going to take the code that I'm giving you and you're going to copy it. It's going to look just like this. You're going to copy it, the whole thing, and you're going to paste it. After you've done that, you're going to make sure right here, whatever word you have, button is what is going to happen. This is what's going to happen when you click on that button. It's really not doing anything here. All it is entering something so that your dice will spin. Save it. It's going to ask you to name it. You can name it whatever you want up here. This part doesn't matter. I called it button. Then you can keep this open or you can close it, but it has to be saved. Make sure there's no errors. So when you run it, it should say saving this code, no errors. Go back to your sheet. Now when you click on it, watch what's going to happen. It's going to run a script. It's going to ask you to authorize. You won't have to do this except the first time. And so I kept mine the same way so you could see all the steps I go through. From here, you're going to pick your account that you're using because it's wherever this spreadsheet is saved, which is in your Google Drive. Pick your account. Give it a second. And from there, here we go. There. After you've picked your account, you'll be able to click on your button and you'll see your dice will change. The random generator will change and all your coding will decide what those dice will look like. Have fun with that. Add in some images. I can't wait to see what people allow this, what people come up with. It should be a lot of fun to be able to share these with each other. And one last thing I want to show you to give you some ideas that we don't have to be stuck to one sheet, but we can play and we can create so many other games there. They changed. Do it one more time. Instead of a 6 and a 5, now I have a 2 and a 1. We could even have something that would sum those together. So let me show you just some other fun ones here to give you some ideas of other things that you can create, such as instead of just rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. You will have to think through the whole process so that you can create something similar to this, where you write in a word. In this case, I'm going to pick Spock, just so you can see it. It doesn't have to be capitalized. And Spock is going against, give it a second. It's a lot slower because Spock vaporizes the computer rock. So you get the idea.